I think they believe that they can adjust their offense to Hurts' skill set and have more of the off schedule plays and trust him in those areas while still relying on him to pass the ball. And I would say that to your question there, and it's a good point. Early on last year, one of the issues, in my opinion, was that they were trying to coach the quarterback they wanted and not the quarterback they had, if that distinction makes sense. And I think that you can't have Jalen Hurts as your quarterback and expect him to be Philip Rivers. And they stopped having that expectation.
One, as in Dave, the Eagles report to training camp. The 2022 season gets underway before we know it. All right, let's get underway here with one of our favorite buddies. He does a great job covering the Birds. He does so for The Athletic. That would be Zach Berman, looking good, looking well tanned, looking ready for grass time. How's your summer been, Zach?
It's been counting down until this Wednesday, so it's going well.
Excited, Zach? I know you're excited.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Like
Any
Christmas
day with
Eve.
football is better than a day without football.
Yeah,
exactly. All right, let me go here first, and I will defend myself ahead of time. And unlike my buddy James Salisbury, not a stupid question, at least in my opinion. But you guys can go ahead and tell me if Zach, it is. When I ask it, Zach, let's say Wednesday, when you get down there, it just so happens that Zach Berman of The Athletic is given the first question to Nick Sirianni, the in-season, started season, first availability of the coach. First question is, Zach Berman, what you asking?
Well, so, it's an interesting question that you asked that because we're talking before practice, not after practice, right? If you're talking after practice, you want an assessment of Hurts. I think that's the big storyline. But I would say going into camp, you want a rundown of the players in, the players out, injury status. Nick isn't one to give you much in that area, but you want to get a sense of that. They don't have guys coming off of major injuries, but this isn't a training camp where there's this big, pertinent, major topic that needs to come across. I think this is one of those camps where over time you're getting a better sense. It's not. I think back to 2018, everything was, when's Carson Wentz going to be on the field, right? And then 2020, it was about the new offense that they had. Last year there were so many questions. Here it's let's get them on the field and let's see how they look.
Well, let's talk about, Zach, that number one story, and it's number one on the jersey number and your hearts, Jalen Hurts. Obviously, this team has done, I think we all agree, Howie Roseman has had an excellent offseason, adding talent to this particular team. Give some love to The Athletic, and your colleague, Mike Sando, just came out with his annual sort of quarterback tiers where he polls coaches and executives. Jalen, tier 3, which I don't think is a surprise, number 20 overall. By the way, he's tied with Carson Wentz. I don't know.
It's kind of ironic.
I don't know if the league is trolling us there, but he's tied with Carson Wentz at 20th overall. He took a big jump from last year. It's the possibility. Now, it's tougher to go from 30 to 20. It's tougher to go from 20 to 10, obviously. But do you see that same kind? Is there at least the possibility of that same kind of significant step forward in year 3 for Jalen Hurts?
The short answer is yes. The more nuanced answer is, to me, it's not can he make that jump? It's what's the jump that comes thereafter, right? Because I think based on Jalen's skill set, based on Jalen's personality, it's certainly conceivable for him to be a top half of the league quarterback. But when you're watching Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes in the postseason, when you're watching Matthew Stafford versus Tom Brady in the postseason, what you're wondering is, can he become one of those guys who's winning you those late January games? And I think, and you know this, John, inside the Eagles building, there's a belief that whatever Jalen's potential is, he's going to hit it.
Yeah.
The tougher question for the people in the building is what exactly is that upside? Because they're not certain of what it is yet. And even if they don't want to put a limit on it, that's going to be the prevailing question with Jalen Hurts, is not can he make the strides to be better. I know he can be better. It's how good can he eventually become?
ZB, coming into camp last year at the tight end position, we knew the Eagles had 2 starter quality tight ends, one of which they were banking on continued improvement and making a commitment to and giving a contract to. The other one, the veteran guy who maybe his better days were behind him, but was still a very viable player. It's a different look in camp this year. It's Dallas Goedert, signed, sealed, delivered, and then a whole bunch of question marks behind him. What's Dallas Goedert's mindset coming into this year? How motivated is he to prove that the contract that he got, he was well worth it? Does he have to try and raise up his guys that he'll be playing with? Because one big hit away and the Eagles are starting a backup tight end this incoming season. What do you think Dallas Goedert's mindset is to start the year in camp this year?
Finally, that's his mindset, right? His mindset is that after all these years of sharing a tight end room, of waiting to become like the unquestioned number one guy, he is the unquestioned number one guy, and you're going to see it in the offense. He's been productive, so it's not as if you're going to see this huge jump in numbers. And there are other players in this passing game, namely A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So his target share isn't going to jump a significant amount either. But he is going to be featured in this offense, and he's going to have a big year as long as he's healthy. They gave him that contract last year with the expectation that he's a top 5 tight end. And I think that's what you're going to see from Dallas Goedert this season.
Do you think there could be any potential issues, Zach, moving forward in the fact that, as you mentioned, Dallas is number 1 in the tight end room now that Zach is gone, and he was for a portion of last season, but he actually took a step down when you talk about game planning. Last year it was, as Nick would say, 6-88 or 88-6. This year it's going to be 11. And then 6, and then 88. So in theory, you take a step back on an offense that is run dependent, or at least run heavy to begin with. Any concern that there's only one football, you have all these playmakers, that could be an issue moving forward down the line, at least at points?
Not in my mind, for 2 reasons. First off, I don't anticipate them being as run dependent as they were toward the second half last year. I think they did that out of necessity, and I think their hope is that they can pass more. Number one, and then number 2, I expect them to run more overall plays than they did last year. To not just in terms of sustaining drives, because they did sustain drives a decent amount the second half last year. But there'll be more points. The game won't slow down as much. They're going to have more plays overall. So no, I don't anticipate that being a problem. Now, if he was in a contract year, maybe it's a bigger question. But you and I have covered this team when their problem has been they don't have enough guys to pass the ball to.
Yeah.
I think they'll welcome the question of how do you keep everyone happy.
But real quick, as a follow-up to that, Zach, what Nick has talked to us many times, and he's admitted when he talks about the quarterback position, he looks at 4 traits, and he looks at accuracy, decision-making, movement skills, extending plays, off schedule, whatever you want to call it, arm strength. Recently, he kind of shifted. It was always accuracy and decision-making first. He said something interesting to me in the fact that, I think his quote was, sometimes you don't realize until you have it. And he said he's kind of weighing maybe that off schedule, that ability to create something out of nothing is just as important as decision-making, or it's getting closer in his mind. We all assume, I'm in the same category as you, they don't want to be as run heavy. Are they starting to think, okay, we have a unique quarterback. we have to take advantage of that and build around that uniqueness versus, okay, we have good receivers. Let's just drop back and throw the football. Any chance of that sort of sea change in thinking because the quarterback is more unique than you're typically going to see?
Sure. I think internally they don't view that as mutually exclusive. I think they believe that they can adjust their offense to Hurts' skill set and have more of the off schedule plays and trust him in those areas while still relying on him to pass the ball. And I would say that to your question there, and it's a good point. Early on last year, one of the issues, in my opinion, was that they were trying to coach the quarterback they wanted and not the quarterback they had, if that distinction makes sense. And I think that you can't have Jalen Hurts as your quarterback and expect him to be Phillip Rivers. And they stopped having that expectation. And if you coach Jalen Hurts for what he is, for what he brings, and build your package around that, it could be a very good offense. And I think that's what they're really going into this season with the objective being. They're going to pass the ball, but they're going to lean into what Jalen does well as well.
Zach, the Eagles have a decision to make between now and the first game of the season, trying to fit 3 linebackers into 2 spots. If you believe the Eagles are going to have 2 linebackers on the field for most of the plays this year, of course, plenty of sub packages, blah, blah, blah. But most plays, the Eagles are going to have 2 linebackers on the field. They've got 3 good ones, 3 legit starting linebackers, at least in my evaluation, in Edwards and Kazir White and Nakobe Dean. They have X amount of practice hours they're going to put in. They have those all-important 2 joint practices with the Dolphins and with the Browns. How's it going to shake out at linebacker? How are we going to find out? And all 3 of them are going to play. We know that because the Eagles like to shuttle linebackers and situational substitute. But somebody's got to play the most. Somebody's got to play the least. The other guy will be in the middle. How will they go about determining that?
Sure. Well, a lot depends on Nakobe Dean's progress, right? They really haven't seen much of him other than the rookie camp and then, the short period of time they had during OTAs. If Nakobe Dean is the Nakobe Dean we saw at Georgia, if he continues on that stride, on that trajectory, if you will, then it's going to be Nakobe Dean and Kaiser White, in my opinion. And TJ Edwards, who's a fine player, right? But throughout throughout his career here, he's been the guy you've gone to when the other options haven't worked out, right? And even though he played well last year, and they gave him that contract, they didn't even tender him. They gave him the contract extension before that. I think that if TJ Edwards is your 3rd linebacker and someone who can play more early in the season while Dean's getting ready, if there are injuries there. But I don't think they're building this defense around the notion that TJ Edwards is their long-term answer at linebacker. So they'll see what those guys have. But, I mean, similar to my answer before about the pass-catching options, we've covered this defense when they haven't had any starting linebackers.
Yeah.
So if their problem is how many linebackers are they going to be able to play, that's a good problem to have as well.
Very true.
That is. Let's talk about the defense as a whole, Zach, because I think it's, I joke that people pay way too much attention to 4-3 versus 3-4 in a league where you're 65%. I think it's ironic that people still call the nickel the sub package. It's not the sub package. The base defense is the sub package. But what do you expect to see from Jonathan Gannon and the fact that people want to put a label on what he's going to play? Can you put a label on it? What is your sort of assessment of what's going on from a schematic standpoint on the defensive side of the football?
So it's an interesting question because you hear from offensive coaches a lot that they want to be matchup dependent, right? And I think that's what you're going to see from the defense. They're going to be a matchup dependent defense. So to give you an example, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I think one week they play the Colts, the next week they play the Packers. The way they play those teams could be different based on the packages that team shows you. they want to be able to adapt to the way they're playing. To the team they're playing. So there are going to be weeks when it might be a heavy Jordan Davis week, right? And there might be weeks when it won't be a heavy Jordan Davis week. Although I guess when I use heavy and Jordan Davis, every week's a heavy Jordan Davis week. But I look at that with the defense. I agree with you that I don't want to say antiquated, but it's somewhat like it lacks nuance to say you're a 3-4 team or you're a 4-3 team. But what you want to be, or I should say what Jonathan Gannon wants to be, is able to play the front that works on a given week. And based on the quarterback you're facing, the offensive line you're facing, the offensive coordinator you're facing, that could change week to week.
All right, Zach B., I find the comparison between the Eagles linebackers and the Eagles safeties intriguing because, again, it's 3 and 2. 2 guys are going to start. The 2 guys are going to play most of the snaps. The third guy will be lesser, but how much lesser is to be determined. Is Marcus Epps the Nakobe Dean of the safety group? He was not a starter last year, but certainly contributed and looked good at times. I think both John and I are on the same page that he might be the number 1 safety if you were to rank him. Where would you put Marcus Epps, second, third, or first? How do you rank the 3 Eagles safeties, Harris, Epps, and Tart coming in from San Francisco?
Well, first off, I think Marcus Epps' agent should take that clip and send it to Howie Roseman, because if he's the Nakobe Dean of this safety group, then that should come up with the contract negotiations. And look, I think Marcus Epps, he's shown promise. In my opinion, I wouldn't build my safety core around Marcus Epps, at least not yet. I mean, I still trust Anthony Harris more. The question there is that I think Epps has more range at this point in his career than Harris does, and they need more range in that secondary. But I think Howie Roseman and the front office had a really good offseason. I still think they did not do nearly enough at safety, and the middle of the field is so important in this defense. They lacked the range there last year. I don't see them having the necessary range there this year, and it could be an issue. And by the way, this wasn't for a lack of trying, right? I mean, they were interested in Marcus Williams. So it's not as if like they have a different evaluation of their depth chart than maybe you and I do. But, I think they have to deal with reality, and they have certain prices, for certain positions. But if there's any position on this team where I think come week 8, week 10, we're saying, why didn't they do more this offseason? It's going to be safety, because, there's a school of thought that you can get by with safeties with like marginal safeties in today's NFL. I actually think it's the opposite. I think this is more of a safety game than it's been in a long time. And you can compensate for it, and you can look for certain traits. But if you're expecting, your safeties to play with range, then you need safeties who have range.
Yeah, and you bring up Marcus Williams, which was a good point, Zach. The Eagles were very interested in signing him until it got a little bit too expensive. There is one safety out there that people keep talking about, and he won't sign his franchise tender in Cincinnati. Now, the Eagles don't even have the space to bid Jesse Bates under their salary cap right now. Cincinnati doesn't want to trade him, which is obviously a very difficult hurdle to overcome. And then you would have to talk about, on top of it, probably a first-round pick. Howie's, honest and says, if I like a player, I'll go get the player. If the Eagles think they are a significant contender, would they move mountains for a 25-year-old second-team All-Pro safety if he keeps pushing things in Cincinnati?
Independent of the contract, I think Bates is a good player. I don't anticipate them doing it based on on like you said, the contract that they would have to give and the draft pick compensation. I think back, my frame of reference here is during the 10 years I've covered the team. Minkah Fitzpatrick, when he was on the trade market, was someone who interested them, but he was also early in his rookie deal. So if you're giving draft pick compensation, you're getting him on a cost-controlled contract. That wouldn't be the case with Jesse Bates here. So I think when you factor in the contracts that are coming up, the contracts that they've already given, it would surprise me at this point. I wouldn't rule it out because he's a good player. But I think that's more of a position that they try to sneak by with this season and they address next offseason.
All right, Zach B., how big is receptions out of the backfield going to be a part of the Eagle offense this year? Because we expect the offense to be different. We expect them to throw it more than they ran it last year. Some people like to say passes to running backs are counted or considered as runs. I've never bought into that. But how big a part of the Eagle offense do you think backs out of the backfield catching ball this year is going to be?
A decent part. I know Nick Sirianni likes it, and he should. I think it's an effective part of any offense. That said, we spoke earlier about the pecking order in the passing game. I think that if with less established or with inferior wide receivers, then you're trying to look for yards in different ways, and that's where you might be feeding Gainwell the ball more out of the backfield or Miles Sanders the ball more out of the backfield. I think with the personnel that they have, that option is going to be, the fourth or fifth look, in your progression. It's not going to be the way it was with, say, Nyheim Hines in Indianapolis when Sirianni was there, because he has better receivers now. And the priority in the passing game is going to be A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert.
Yeah. And Jalen Hurts, I always say, Zach, his ability to run the football, a lot of quarterbacks have to dump it off to the back to get 10, 15 yards. Jalen might just keep it and get 20. And Nick's kind of mentioned that as well. So
I would add to there, a big question I've received from fans this offseason is the lack of the, quote unquote power running back. And in my estimation, Jalen Hurts is their power running back. And we both know that this is a data-driven organization. If you look at the data of Jalen Hurts, his short yardage running, his goal line running, I mean, compare it, say, to LeGarrette Blount's a few years ago. Compare it to Jordan Howard's a few years ago. You're getting more efficiency and better production from Jalen Hurts in those situations than you would the quote-unquote power back. So as long as you're not worried about Jalen Hurts getting injured, I think your power back in this offense is Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and they just signed their big power back yesterday. Jaquan Hardy going to be the guy.
Not yet. He's coming in today.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think that's more of a camp body, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Putting the cart before the horse here. I get it. I apologize. All right, week 1 against the Detroit Lions. Different people have opinions about the Lions coming into the year. Peter King, who I hold his football opinion on high, thinks they're going to be a much improved team. I know Dan Campbell's a quote machine, but I just don't think he's that good a football coach, and I don't think Jared Goff's a very good quarterback, and it may take some time for Hutchinson, the high draft pick, to actually become a guy who's a double-digit sack guy. What happens if the Eagles go to Detroit and lose week 1? I've been a positive Eagle guy looking at the glass half full all day here, so I got to balance the scales. If they go to Detroit and lose week number 1, what's it going to be like around here, Zach Berman?
Well, the three of us would have a lot to talk about, right? I mean, I think, look, this is a soft schedule early in the season, and I think that you don't want to slip up week 1 in Detroit, but it's it doesn't end your season, and there are so many variables in week 1, and we've seen that in years past. I expect them to win that game, but again, I wouldn't overstate it. Now, if they're 1-3, that's problematic because, like I said, the schedule gets more difficult later, later in the season. It's kind of the opposite of last year. Last year, we looked at him and you said it might be a tough start, but they can get wins later on. And this year, I don't think that's the case.
Last one from me, Zach. Everybody follow Zach Berman at ZBerm on Twitter. Read him at theathletic.com/Billy. Does a phenomenal job covering this team. Another team the Eagles play this year is the Arizona Cardinals. I got to be honest, Zach. I got a little sticker shock when I saw Kyler Murray's contract. Now, it's not a problem for the Eagles right now. They don't have to worry about it until after this season. But we've talked about Jalen Hurts and the potential extension, and you got to think about the future when you're talking about the present in this league as well, especially as a general manager. You know where this is going. Lamar Jackson's next. You got Joe Burrow. You got Justin Herbert. These prices are only going to go up and up and up and up. And if you start talking about letting Jalen play out his rookie deal, letting him play on the franchise tag by that time, Zach, is going to be upwards of $35 to $40 million. Yeah. Does any of this change the Eagles' thought process at the quarterback position from a larger picture standpoint, just because how expensive it is doing the cost of business at that position on a second deal?
I think that it's a valid question. If you have the right quarterback, you're not worried about paying that price. And that you are correct. That price is going to keep going up. That's why the Eagles paid Carson when they did, right? Because they didn't think there were going to be any discounts in future years, and they projected that correctly. Now the player they did not project, but correct. That's besides the point. I don't think it factors too much into the short-term evaluation of Jalen Hurts. I actually think that if push came to shove, they would let him play out that fourth year of the deal, and then they would worry about the year after that, the year after that. But it does give you, to a degree, more of a pressure point in terms of making that decision, because next year's draft is going to be deeper at quarterback, or more, it's going to be better at quarterback than this year's draft. You never know who's going to be available, but in terms of free agency or trades, but more so, you're not going to have an endless supply. I shouldn't say endless supplies. You're not going to have a premium supply of resources every year, and the Eagles have a premium supply of resources again next season. So I think it's more likely the Eagles have to decide one way or the other with Jalen Hurts, if he's your guy going forward after the season. But again, I don't view the same pressure, if you will, on making that contract decision, because he can play out the fourth year of his deal. And I don't think that they should necessarily be averse to that, but they can make, there's going to be more pressure on them to make that decision about whether Hurts is your guy or not after this season.
All right, last one for me, Zach. Since last year's number ended at 2, I will set this year's under-over number at 1.5. Sacks by Derrick Barnett. Are you going over 1.5 or under 1.5?
I'm going over 1.5. I mean, look, Derrick Barnett's not going to have the same role here that he's had in past years. But if you're an edge rusher on passing downs, you can stumble your way into 2 sacks. And so, yeah, I would feel good taking the over in that category.
And he did stumble his way into 2 sacks last year. So that's saying he's just as good this year as he was last year. We'll see if that plays out. ZB, always a pleasure, buddy. Appreciate it. We're going to tap into you every once in a while to come on with us, because we appreciate your insight to the Eagles. McMullen appreciates standing next to you when you're out there on grass time.
Makes him feel taller.
Guys who takes hygiene the right way. It should be a fun upcoming season. Looking forward to reading you in The Athletic, getting you here on Birds 365. Thanks, bud.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That is.